I wanted to ask you a little bit about I guess, a vulnerability assessment you performed, where you simulated a distributed denial of service attack for, was it $2?
Where this all started was is we had an outage. We had an outage. The Some of our middle tier and backend services went out because of a misconfigured client. I was like, how does a misconfigured client, like think of like a Samsung TV or something was misconfigured? I was like, how does that actually take, how does that like cause an outage? And as I started to dig into the incident, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. The client is asking for a ridiculous amount of information from our services. And it's like, and it's a bug. Effectively, instead of saying, hey, I want 10 shows, I want your whole catalog, is kind of summarizing what it was sort of doing. And I was like, that's sort of interesting. And I started to look at sort of the client calls happening in the product when I would open up my browser and sort of click around and stream. And I saw a couple calls that seemed to take, I don't know, a second and a half or two to complete. I was like, well, those calls seem interesting. What do they look like? And they were graph style calls. And so for your listeners, you can sort of think of that as like, we had a gateway kind of graph product at the edge that you could sort of put a bunch of things you wanted in about a particular show as an example, and it would return that context to you. But what was happening behind the scenes as I started to dig in and at those calls that were kind of latent was I would say, hey, I want, give me all the bookmarks for the shows I've watched in the last 2 months. And it had this little structure and it was like 0 to 10. I could see it. Bookmarks 0 to 10. Okay. 100. Oh, the call took an extra 5 seconds. Okay. 200, 300. Oh, 417. Request entity too large.